This film is strictly for educational purposes only.
If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war. Rather than a war. Rather than a war.
5G, as you well know, also uses higher frequency waves that don't travel as far and will rely on a network of hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of small cell sites. And the question then is, are there any health implications, any public safety implication? So my question for you, particularly Mr. Gillen and Mr. Perry.
Thank you, Senator. I think, thank you for your focus on the issue. Safety is paramount, and as you alluded to, we rely on the expert agencies, we rely on the findings of the FDA and others as to the requirements to keep all of us safe. There are no industry-backed studies, to my knowledge right now. Happy to visit with you as to what opportunities you think there needs to be more studies, and we're always for more science. We also rely on what the scientists tell us.
So essentially, the answer to my question, how much money? Zero.
I can certainly follow up with you, Senator. To my knowledge, there's no active studies being backed by industry today.
Anybody else know of industry commitments to back research, fund it, support it, to ascertain scientifically the health effect?
No, I'm not aware of any.
So there really is no research ongoing. We're kind of flying blind here, so far as health and safety is concerned. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
To your testimony in opposition to the legislation. You have 5 minutes, ma'am. Please proceed.
And committee members, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I'm Sharon Goldberg. I'm an internal medicine physician. I've practiced medicine for 21 years, and my background is mostly academic, internal medicine, hospital-based, clinical research, and medical education. I am going to skip many of the things I wanted to say because I didn't realize it was only 5 minutes. Wireless radiation has biological effects, period. This is no longer a subject for debate when you look at PubMed and the peer-reviewed literature. These effects are seen in all life forms: plants, animals, insects, microbes. In humans, we have clear evidence of cancer now. There is no question. We have evidence of DNA damage, cardiomyopathy, which is the precursor of congestive heart failure, neuropsychiatric effects. So 5G is not a conversation about whether or not these biological effects exist. They clearly do. 5G is a conversation about unsustainable healthcare expenditures. Why do I say this? We've been sitting on the evidence for EMR and chronic disease for decades. And now we are seeing all these epidemics appearing. So diabetes is the first epidemic. I think most of you know the statistics. They're very scary. 1 in 3 American children will become diabetic in their lifetime, and if they're Hispanic females, the number is 1 in 2. So what does this have to do with wireless radiation? Wireless radiation and other electromagnetic fields, such as magnetic fields and dirty electricity, have been clearly associated with elevated blood sugar and diabetes. That is what the peer-reviewed literature says. It is not opinion. The closer you live to a cell tower, the higher your blood glucose. That is based on hemoglobin A1C measurements. So the idea with small cells of putting the cells closer to people's homes and bedrooms scientifically is very dangerous. And from an economic perspective, it's dangerous. And you may not know this. I was shocked to find this out. But the way you create a model of diabetes in rats in the lab is by exposing them to 2.4 gigahertz. And this is not for long-term exposure. I don't have time to talk about the costs, but the huge problem with diabetes really is chronic kidney disease. End-stage renal disease, the worst complication of diabetes, leads to hemodialysis. Hemodialysis is an automatic qualification for Medicare. And if you don't qualify for Medicare, we still have to dialyze the patient. And the state ends up paying in many different instances. So renal failure is 1% of Medicare, but it takes up 7% of all Medicare expenditures. I don't have time to talk about this anymore, but once again, the other epidemics that clearly link from the science with electromagnetic radiation are related to mental health. And this is straight from PubMed. This isn't my opinion, this is science. Okay?
Dr. Goldberg, for those of us who aren't physicians, what is PubMed?
I'm sorry. It's just it's our National Library of Medicine. This is where you would go. This is just the peer-reviewed literature. So we have 3 epidemics that clearly, they're essentially one epidemic. We have deterioration of mental health in the United States. And if you look really at the science, what does it show? And these epidemics are suicide epidemics, in violent, shootings, and the opioid epidemic. And I don't have 5 minutes is not the time to talk about this. This is in the peer-reviewed literature. I have a file to submit for the record, but these are facts. These are things that have just been glossed over by the wireless industry, and I really don't have time to talk about them in 5 minutes. I wish I did. But we need to examine our epidemic in the context of our EMF exposures. What does that mean? That means that the CDC tracking these epidemics we need to start measuring how much radiation are people being exposed to. And before we roll out 5G, and this means there are 4 kinds of electromagnetic fields that we know are harmful to human health. So radio frequency radiation, magnetic fields, dirty electricity, and electric fields, okay? Our exposure, any given person, and all humans are affected by EMFs. Our given exposure has nothing to do with the research that my colleagues are going to cite with the National Toxicology Program. That is an assessment of the risk of 1 cell phone in the near field, okay? What is our exposure in a day? It's not 1 cell phone. It's cell phones, it's multiple wireless networks, it's smart meters, it's cell towers. It's this sandwich, and it all adds up. And this is a serious problem for occupational health, public safety, and personal safety. And I feel that it's irresponsible to be even talking about the Internet of Things and rolling out a new untested technology when we're not even measuring what are our current exposures from the current networks.
This is my work ID. I work for Well Cornell Medicine on 68th in York. I do comparative pathology research. We deal with biohazardous materials and radiation particles. We inject animals like rhesus monkeys, rats, and mice with disease and radioactive agents. 2 weeks ago when I went to work, I noticed the security guards were in Tyvek hazmat suits and they were armed, which is not normal, but I didn't pay it any mind. I go upstairs to work, I clock in. My boss is like, yo, listen, you're not needed, but we need you to surrender your Geiger counter. My Geiger counter was attached to my ID because we deal with radiation emissions in my department on the 7th floor, which is the only department that deals with radiation. but they wanted me to surrender my Geiger counter. When I left work, the only people that were left in my building's facility were the scientists, the professors, the researchers, and security guards that were armed. It's not the virus that's getting people sick. It's 5G network from the radiation. And the reason why they have me surrender my Geiger counter is so if I'm in a proximity of people that have 5G networks, my Geiger counter is going to detect that I'm in a proximity of radiation. That's what's getting people sick. That's what's getting people with respiratory issues. That's why some people are dying. Now, my homie works for Verizon. He got a message via email from corporate instructing him and his 100-man crew to pump 5G network cables throughout the tri-state area, whether buildings or houses were abandoned or not. The letter said, if your crew gets sick, we'll send them home and you keep on working. Don't worry, when they say that the oil is short, you'll be first dibs to get the oil. The oil you declare. Exactly.
I'm Dr. Deborah Davis, and I'm here to talk with you today about the 5G that Environmental Health Trust is quite concerned about. This is a network that's being rolled out all over the country that will involve thousands of antennas. I love my devices as much as anyone else, but I don't want to put the health of my grandchildren at risk. I don't want to put them in harm's way. And we now know that the skin, our largest organ, does respond to 5G. And in fact, we have in our sweat ducts, they can act as antennas that can receive signals. Now, this has not been tested for safety. The fact that it can interact with our sweat ducts may have much more profound meanings for our overall health and well-being. The idea that we're going to saturate this country with a network that has never been tested is appalling. And I am joining with many other scientists from around the world now to express concerns and to say we must evaluate these things before we roll out the technology, no matter how attractive it is for us to have faster downloads of video games, pornography, or virtual reality. The question we have to ask ourselves, is it worth endangering the health of our children to do that?
I specialized in microwave warfare, radar, obviously, which uses microwave, but they don't just teach you radar, they teach you all about microwaves and other uses. So I understood about microwave warfare and how it can damage people, how it can harm people. And when I finished with the Royal Navy, I was also a diver in the Royal Navy, and microwaves are used in underwater mines as booby traps. Which actually got me interested because I was actually taking a bomb to pieces underwater, and it was too complicated. And I brought it to the surface, and my partner that was on the surface said, "Don't be an idiot, take it back down." He said, if somebody's beaming you with microwaves, they'll go right through you, and as you open the casing, trigger a photoelectric cell, and it'll blow all of us up. And he said, if it doesn't go through to the bomb, it'll aim it at your head and make you make a mistake. And that's really got me interested from that point, because I thought, well, how can microwaves going into your brain make you make a mistake? And I asked a lot of questions. I have a very curious brain, and the forces, they're very good at explaining things and telling you things. So I did that, and I also did a medical course while I was in to help me understand everything. And when I left, a small part of my job was to question captured agents, spies, terrorists, because microwaves then were used as weapons, as they are today. It is a perfect stealth weapon. And when governments don't like a group of people, for instance, the ladies who protest at Greenham Common in England about the American missile base they camped, they were microwaved. We microwaved Catholics in Northern Ireland to make them sick. It goes on all over the world. And it's a weapon that you don't know you're being targeted, because the dose is very, very low, which is actually more dangerous than a high dose. It's very, very low, and it may take a year or two, but you can cause neurological damage and cancers with low-level microwaves, and you can make all your opponents sick. It's a perfect weapon for a government.
If you are dealing with a virus that can be killed in 80-degree weather, that means it's weak. So, no. Coronavirus is not people. It's the 5G radiation that they're pumping out, number one, through your phone, number two, through these cell towers that they're installing right now as you're at home in your cozy house. Number three, you wouldn't need a mandatory curfew unless you were doing something illegal to the people who didn't know. Okay? Yeah. So while you're at home on mandatory lockdown from 9 to 5, that's when they're installing 5G that does not need to go up, because it's going to fry your brain. Okay? It's going to fry your insides. It's going to scramble you. It's going to give you cancer. It's going to give you leukemia. It's going to give you flight symptoms so bad that you're going to think you have corona.
It's a perfect weapon for a government to use. So that was going on, and I gathered all the information about that from people who were captured from other countries to find out what technologies they had, what pulse frequencies they used. But as I stressed, it was only a small part of my work, but because I was highly trained in it and I was useful, it just became a part of my working structure, along with master criminals and terrorists and all sorts of people that I found incredibly interesting, actually, to talk to. Very, very interesting. And then when I left there, I took a job teaching, and I taught advanced level physics, and I specialized in nuclear and atomic radiation, and again, microwaves. And I've just always been in microwaves. And then it was a doctor. I went to see a doctor once, as most teachers do, with a sore throat. And he said, as most doctors do, it's viral, there's nothing I can do for you. And I was leaving, and he said, hang on, Barry, he said, you're a physicist? And I said, yeah. And he said, can you explain something? He said, I went to a house that had a cot death 5 years ago. And the family moved, and a new family moved in. They had a new baby. The cot was in exactly the same place, and there was another cot death. And he said, 5 years apart. And he said, there's a transmitter the other side of the child's bedroom wall. Could the transmitter cause the cot death? And I said, I don't know. I said, but I'll look into it. And then I found that microwaves were involved, and I knew what microwaves did. And a while later, I went back to the doctor, I wrote a paper on it, and I said, there's your answer. Microwaves can cause cot death by 2 or 3 different mechanisms. There's your answer. And then, for some reason, he told somebody who told somebody, and people started phoning me up and writing to me, saying, can you explain this, or can you help with that? I've never actually asked anyone if I can do anything. They always come to me. And then the police came to me and said, we're getting this new Tetra airwave system. We don't understand what's happening. Can you read all this scientific rubbish and just put it into Janet and John and tell us? And I said, of course I can. So that was published, and since then it's snowballed and snowballed and snowballed, and now I receive up to 1,000 communiques a week from various countries, various people, and I can't handle it.
What are you guys doing here?
Putting a fiber optic.
What is it for?
For school.
For what though?
Just internet.
For what kind of internet?
E-text.
Does that have anything to do with 5G?
Yes.
So they're installing 5G here at this school? Do you know why they're doing it while all the parents are at home and nobody knows what's going on?
Well, this actually started since December last year. And this has nothing to do with what's going on or none of that.
Okay, so it's not being done behind our backs?
No.
Do you know that 5G is going to be very harmful for children and that cancer is going to skyrocket?
No.
What you're doing is going to harm a lot of children.
I hope not. I mean, I'm just a contractor for them, so...
I know. A lot of us parents are very, very concerned.
I think anyone who puts Wi-Fi into a school should be locked up for the rest of their life. I really do. I think they're not fit to walk on the surface of this planet because they haven't looked at the research, and whatever incentive they have, it is not worth the genetic problems that parents are going to face with their children when they're born. And if you think of a single parent, a mother, who has a genetically deformed child, that particular mother will feel guilty because she gave birth. She will feel guilty and she will be worried every single second of every single day for her life. She will worry that the child won't marry. If the child can marry, she'll worry that the children will carry the disease, which they will. She will worry when she dies who will take care of them. So you are condemning both the family and the children to a lifetime of absolute hell. 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 Hell.
I'm just here to make you think.